Good evening. I'd like to call the regular meeting of the Milton City Council for November 16th, 2009 to order. Will City Clerk please call the roll and make our general announcements?
Good evening, Mayor and Council. I'll be happy to call roll for the November 16th, 2009 regular meeting. However, I would like to remind those in attendance to please silence all cell phones at this time. Additionally, those attending the meeting who would like to provide public comment either during the public hearings or during the call for public comment, we do require that you complete a public comment card prior to speaking on that item. There is no public comment for consent agenda items or items under first presentation. Those called to speak will be taken in order that the speaker cards were received by City Clerk staff prior to the meeting. All speakers will identify themselves by name, address, and organization if applicable. When you hear the bell, you'll have 30 seconds to complete your remarks. The City Council may allow public comment on either an agenda item or general public comment from a representative of such an organized group or association, provided, however, that such an individual shall file a notarized affidavit that they have the authority to speak on behalf of said organization on a form provided by City Clerk staff. Demonstration of any sort within the chamber is prohibited, so please refrain from any applause, cheering, booing, outbursts, or dialogue with any person speaking. Please show the same respect to the person speaking you would expect to receive yourself. As I call roll, please confirm your attendance. Mayor Joe Lockwood.
Here.
Councilmember Karen Thurman.
Here.
Councilmember Julie Zonner Bailey.
Here.
Councilmember Bill Lusk.
Here.
Councilmember Bert Hewitt. Let the record reflect that Councilmember Hewitt is not present. Councilmember Tina D'Aversa.
Here.
Councilmember Alan Tart.
Here.
Thank you. Would everyone please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance?
Do we have a... Oh, good.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. I want to, again, welcome everybody here. Looks like we've got some of our high school students here, so welcome you. Welcome. Hope you enjoy the meeting tonight. So if our city clerk will please call the next item.
Our first item is approval of the meeting agenda, agenda item number 09972. Mr. Mayor, staff is recommending that we remove the executive session this evening, and that completes our recommendations.
Okay, is there any other items to be considered by the council? Okay, hearing none. Do I have a motion and a second?
Mayor, I'd like to make a motion to approve the meeting agenda as modified by staff.
Second.
A motion by Councilmember Tart, second by Councilmember D'Aversa. Any discussion? Hearing none.
All those in favor of the motion, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? That's unanimous.
Okay, next item is public comment. Public comment is a time for citizens to share information with the mayor and the city council and to provide input and opinions on any item that is not scheduled for its own public hearing during today's meeting. There's no discussion on the items on the consent agenda or first presentation from the public or from council. Each citizen who chooses to participate in public comment must complete a comment card and submit it to the city clerk. Please remember this is not a time to engage the mayor or members of the city council in conversation. When your name is called, please step forward and speak into the microphone stating your name and address for the record. You will have 5 minutes for the remarks. Ms. City Clerk, do we have any public comment tonight?
No public comment, sir.
Okay, let's move on to the consent agenda. Please sound the items.
The first item is approval of the November 2nd, 2009 regular meeting minutes. That's item number 09973. Item number 2 is approval of financial statements for the period ending October 2009. That's item number 09974. Item number 3 on the consent agenda is the approval of the execution of a renewal contract with Emory Clinic to continue provision of medical direction service, item number 09975. 4 is approval of a contract with Milton and Jenkins, LLC, to audit the city's financial statements for the fiscal year ending September 30th, 2009, item number 09976. Item number 5 is approval of a contract with Milton and Jenkins, LLC, to audit the annual report of 911 collections and expenditures for the year ended September 30th, 2009, item number 09977. And item number 6 is approval of a contract from AT&T providing a managed firewall for the T1 Internet circuit, agenda item number 09978.
Okay, do I have a motion and a second on the agenda?
Mr.
Consent
Mayor.
agenda.
Move to approve the consent agenda as read.
Second.
I have a motion by Councilmember Luss, second by Councilmember Tartt to approve the consent agenda.
All those in favor of the motion, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? That's unanimous.
Okay, we're going to move on to our first presentation. Will the city clerk please sound the item?
Approval of an ordinance regulating the location, placement, and leasing of wireless telecommunications facilities. Agenda item number 09979.
Okay, do I have a motion and a second?
I'll put forward a motion, and that would be to approve an ordinance regulating the location, placement, and leasing of wireless telecommunication facilities, agenda number 09979 for first presentation.
I'll second that.
Okay, I have a motion by Councilmember Bailey and second by Councilmember Thurman.
All those in favor of the motion, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? That's unanimous.
Okay, we're going to move on to the zoning agenda. Will the city clerk please read the zoning rules and sound the first item?
At the second regularly scheduled meeting of the month, the mayor and city council consider a zoning agenda. These items include rezoning petitions, modifications of zoning use permits, and associated concurrent variances, in addition to ordinances, resolutions, and text amendments. The petitions will be heard in the sequence listed on the posted agenda. I would like to acquaint you with some of the rules and procedures for this meeting. The applicant and all those speaking in support of the application will be allowed a total of 10 minutes to present the petition. The applicant may choose to save some of the time for rebuttal following the presentation by the opposition. The opposition will be allowed a total of 10 minutes to present its position. If time remains, the opposition will be allowed to rebut. Since the burden of proof is upon the applicant will be allowed to make closing remarks provided time remains within the allotted time. City clerk staff will be keeping track of time and will inform you periodically of the remaining time for your presentation. Those called to speak will be taken in the order that the speaker cards were received by city clerk staff prior to the meeting. All speakers will identify themselves by name, address, and organization, if applicable, before beginning their presentation. The Planning Commission heard the rezoning agenda items and recommendations have been forwarded to the mayor and city council for consideration and disposition. In addition, the applicant shall not submit material to the council during the meeting unless requested to do so. When an opponent of a rezoning action has made within 2 years immediately preceding the filing of the rezoning action being opposed, campaign contributions aggregating $250 or more to a local government official of the local government which will consider the application, it shall be the duty of the opponent to file a disclosure with the governing authority of the respective local government at least 5 days prior to the Planning Commission meeting. A violation of the relevant state statute constitutes a misdemeanor. Therefore, if you have contributed $250 or more to a council member and you have not filed a disclosure prior to the Planning Commission meeting, the city attorney's office strongly suggests that you have someone else speak on your point of view. Mr. Mayor, our first item is ZM 09-03, which is the northwest corner of Webb and Morse Roads by Precision Design and Development, Bowen Family Homes. This is a request to modify the following conditions. Number 1, to modify Condition 1D, which is RZ05-022, site development shall be substantially consistent with the rendering and elevation submitted to the Fulton County Department of Environment and Community Development on June 27, 2005, except for lots identified as 136 through 216 on the revised site plan submitted on September the 11th, 2009 to the City of Milton Community Development Department. Item number 2 is to modify Condition 1F, which is RZ05-022. The minimum heated floor area for a townhouse unit shall be 2,000 square feet, except for those lots identified as 136 through 216. Shall be a minimum heated floor area of 1,850 square feet. All units shall have a rear entry 2-car garage, except for those lots identified as 136 through 216 on the revised site plan submitted on September the 11th, 2009 to the City of Milton Community Development Department. And number 3 is to modify Condition 2A, which is ZM07-03. This is to replace the revised site plan submitted on July the 2nd, 2007 to the City of Milton Community Development Department with the revised site plan submitted on September the 11th, 2009 to the City of Milton Community Development Department. And any changes to the site plan must be approved by the Director of Community Development and must meet or exceed the requirements of the zoning ordinance in these conditions. Unless otherwise noted herein, compliance with all conditions shall be in place prior to the issuance of the first certificate of occupancy. This is item number 09952, first presentation on October 5th, 2009, deferred on October the 19th, 2009. Mr. Tom Wilson.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. This request to exchange approximately 60 units from rear entry garages to front entry garages is not really a land use issue. And by that I mean that the land use does not change regardless of what your decision is tonight. It is zone mix and it will remain that way. My recommendation is based on essentially two things: whether or not this request is consistent with a comprehensive plan and whether or not this request is consistent with known policy. In this case, you as a council have not approved any garages, either front entry garages or rear entry garages, so that leaves me with the only policy established that I can find, or that I know of at this point, is that policy that was established by the Board of Commissioners back in 2005. And that was for rear entry garages. The Board of Commissioners actually had three conditions which required rear entry garages, which is a little unusual. Quite often, and as you know, we change site plans, we modify site plans to make some changes in that. Had this rear entry garage has been captured only in condition 2A, which was the site plan, that would be one thing. But instead, this has been captured in two other conditions. In fact, there's a condition that specifically requires rear entry garages. I can only think that that is a reflection of the community values that were perceived, at least by the Board of Commissioners at that time. So I would like to say that as we have reviewed this with the developer, we have made some recommendations to him that would soften the impact of his request, specifically that all of those units that front the amenities area remain rear entry garages in order to keep the character of this development. You're all very familiar with the development. It's a very nice looking development. And that just leaves units 136 through 163 as requests now for front entry garages as opposed to rear entry garages. My recommendation is for denial based on the fact that it is not entirely consistent with the policy that was established in 2005 by the Board of Commissioners.
Okay, do we have any questions from council to Mr. Wilson? Okay.
I have a question. You're recommending denial, but you said that, given a modification to just expose 136 to 163 as front entry, that you would be not opposed to that?
I did not say that, no.
What was your?
I'm saying that as we worked through this, we did make recommendations to him that we thought would soften this from your perspective, and that was to eliminate about half of the units or prevent them from becoming front entry garages and leave them as rear entry garages. The developer has accepted that. That was also the recommendation from the Design Review Board when this went as a courtesy review to the Design Review Board. So what I'm saying now is there's just units 136 through 183 that remain request for rear entry, front entry garages as opposed to rear entry garages.
Okay. But your recommendation is still denial?
Still for denial.
Bill, did you have a question? No.
I'll figure out what the question is.
Yeah, I'm trying to figure out exactly, follow you on that. What you're saying, Mr. Wilson, is that those were recommendations from staff that might make this more of a palatable, the application, and that the developer had agreed, would agree to do those same things by keeping
He
the...
did. And he's
keeping
changed the
others
site plan,
the
submitted a new
rear.
site plan that shows all of those units surrounding the amenities area as remaining rear entry garages.
Okay. Any other questions?
Are all those 136 to 163, are all those not visible from the street?
They are not fronting the street, but certainly some of those closest to Morris Road would be visible as you drove north on Morris Road. I don't think they would be particularly visible as you drove south on Morris Road.
But units 149 through 163 are not visible at all from the road, is that correct?
Units number 186 through 220 are not visible at all. I doubt that you would be able to see 163 through 155, but if you looked, you could probably see 154 through 136 from Morris Road.
Julie?
Just to clarify again, my understanding and looking at the site plan that's before us is that from Morris Road, you actually do see, and I didn't bring my reading glasses, 136 through at least 154, and to your point, Mr. Wilson, potentially through 158 because of the curvature of the road. My understanding from some of the citizens that we've heard from, and I realize we haven't had our public hearing, but just for clarity of this, is that part of the concerns that had been voiced back in 2005 and what we've subsequently heard is the concern that there is in fact a view from Morris Road and that it starts to bump up against those community values, which is why I think we saw 3 of those zoning conditions reflecting a rear entry. But just so that I'm clear, it's my understanding that what's before us tonight does not modify and make these all rear entry. And can we just specify again how many of the units are still being requested based on what's before us and was advertised as rear entry?
From 136 all the way to 163, that would be, do the math,
But those are all reflected as front entry
front entry
currently.
garages.
Right,
I'd
so
also
that-
like to point out that there is parking along this street. The street was designed for parking.
Right.
So once that parking is filled up, that will certainly diminish your view of down that street and up the front of these buildings.
It's 27 is the new number.
27 remain requested to be exchanged for front entry garages.
And all of those in the original conditions were considered rear entry.
That is correct. I also want to mention one other thing. The exchange of rear entry to front entry would necessitate a reduction in the minimum unit size from 2,000 to 1,850,
You say it
just
would-
based on the change of the design of the unit for front entry as opposed to rear entry.
Have we seen a landscaping plan of this site?
There was a landscaping plan. There is a landscaping plan. I'm sorry, sir, I do not have that with me tonight, but there is a landscaping plan that was approved as part of the land disturbance permit back before these things were permitted to be built.
Has there been any discussion as relating to disguising or softening the impact of a front entry garage with the landscape?
There has been some discussion with the developer about that. My understanding is that he is certainly willing to do anything like that that would soften that or help obscure the view. I don't think it can be any way in which you can obscure the view down that street with landscaping, because obviously you see down the street. But to the degree in which it could be softened, my understanding is he is certainly willing to do that.
Karen?
I've got a couple questions. First of all, you said you're recommending denial based on community values. And the community value is just specific to this site plan because there are other site plans adjacent to this where the community value was to have front entry garages, correct?
Yes, my recommendation is based on the policy that I gleaned from the 3 conditions in this zoning case, which require front entry garages.
Okay. But when you said community value, you did not mean for this whole area as a whole. It just was that one site plan specific.
That is correct.
And the other question I had was as far as the DRB, because they have reviewed this.
They did a courtesy review on this a few months back.
And they were okay with the site plan that is currently before us? Because
They were okay with the site plan dated October 30th, I think it was, October 30th, which showed only those 27 units with front entry garages and the other ones remaining rear entry garages.
and in their courtesy review, they felt like this was appropriate.
That is correct.
Have any other questions?
Is the applicant here? Are we going to have a
Yeah,
presentation from them?
yeah, we'll have these are just questions before the applicant gets up and speaks. So if there's no more questions for Mr. Wilson, I'll ask those to step up, come up that are in support of this application.
I don't have a card submitted, sir, but I believe there is someone here representing the applicant or who is the applicant, if he'd like to come
I
forward.
think he's got the card there.
Oh, you got it? Okay, Mr. Woods.
Good evening. My name is Corbett Woods. I represent the applicant, Bowen Family Homes. My address is 6650 Chevrolet Parkway, Duluth, Georgia. In prior hearings, some of our residents from Deerfield Green had been here in support of what we're asking for tonight. I don't see any of them here tonight, but I have not heard anything to indicate any lack of support of our change to introduce this product along this area to mitigate the effects of the large retaining wall in the pond, which is what we've been trying to avoid this whole time. I've heard within the last 12 hours about some concerns about the visual impact along, I'm going to remember, Morris Road. And I agree that the southern, as you come south into town, there's this existing stand of mature trees that mitigate any view of the buildings at all, driveways or not. As you come north, going out of town toward Bethany Road, there is an existing entryway that's in with a fenced landscaped area. I do think we could take the fence out and raise it up 3 or 4 feet to create more of a berm to shift the visual appeal toward the existing hard, mature trees as opposed to a hard look down the driveways. That's something I think we can do and work with staff's recommendation to get that done. We've been working on this for a little while, and staff's, I think we've come to a point that we're willing to do all the changes that they've asked for, specific to limiting the number of units, specific to what's impacted by the wall and the pond. And I'd be happy to answer any questions y'all have regarding this.
Do you have any questions for the applicant? Or should we freeze his time and allow him some rebuttal and questions?
Yes, sir, that's all the comment cards I have, both for and against at this time.
Okay, all right. Then I'm going to close the public hearing and then allow questions to the applicant. Is there any questions to the applicant? Alan?
I just have one question. I'm not sure whether it would be best directed to you or whether it would be best directed to staff, but there appears to be a discrepancy between, okay, we've got 27 properties at this point that are being requested. If we take off the properties that have been deleted from the request based on the fact that they face the common area. So we're left with 27 properties. We've heard from one or more citizens regarding properties 149 through 163, which are more interior to the property and not visible from Morris Road. So if there had been improved landscaping, perhaps some modification to the berm, that would not be an issue. But that leaves about 13 other properties that, according to this citizen, would be an issue even with those increased those improvements made. And can you speak? Do you know what
Yes,
13 properties that we're talking about there?
Yes, I will. I appreciate the input from Ms. Souter, and on this particular point, I think it looks better if council allows us to build a continuous row of the larger number, because if you have the rear entry right there at the beginning, it looks like we just jammed something in there. And part of our goal with coming in, even asking it all, was to alleviate the hardship caused by that retaining wall in the back corner, which happens to be closest to the road. I do think once you get to full build-out, there's a huge specimen tree that we've gone to tremendous lengths to avoid. And just before that, there's a focal point to your eye as you drive up the road. And then once the units are built along that surround the tree, on your site plan, I believe they're going to be, trying to look, I can't see the numbers from here. Yes. build units 135, that building right there, that's going to really take away from what you see going north on Morris Road. This building will block out the visual going that way.
He's saying that building right there,
There's multiple
that building right there, that group of buildings right there will block out the vision going north on Morris Road.
The tree I was referencing, Mr. Wilson, is right south of those buildings. There's a large open area. I don't have the pointer, but
in front of
you all know where the tree is.
127. Is that where it is?
It's going to be a disaster.
He's out.
Here we go.
Large tree is like right in there. Y'all probably aware of it. It's been out. I think it will be a better compliment to the city if it gets approved in the larger length of the units as opposed to being stuck in as a smaller identification. And plus, we're going to build something that's high quality. We came to DRB. They've been supportive of the architectural plan to put there. Our residents that are in there now would like to have some more neighbors and like us to introduce this extra activity, and you'll be getting more activity. And just appreciate your all's consideration of our request. I think we've worked together with staff to get to a solution that works well for everyone, including the city, us, and our neighbors that live in that neighborhood.
Have any more? Julie?
Thank you, Mayor. And thank you, Mr. Woods. Look, and obviously, I think you're familiar with some of the community input that we've gotten in terms of the visual concerns of number 136. I'm sorry, again, without my reading glasses. 136 through 154. Has there been some discussion, Mr. Wilson, so part of these questions may be from Mr. Wilson or for you, Mr. Woods, about allowing, again, those interior townhomes to have the front entry, but to maintain the perspective of that rear entry for those that would be visually accessible from Morris Road? I mean, has there been some discussion about doing a blended approach whereby number 155 to 163, which would be more internal, and allow those to be front entry, but and to Mr. Wood's point for consistency, if you have the consistency of 136 through 154 being rear entry, and that would then be consistent with those conditions that I know historically the citizens worked.
I have not had that discussion with him.
Okay.
I strongly feel that our original intent was to mitigate the hardship of that wall. There's a huge wall there with an alleyway. A lot has, and I realize it was a site plan specific zoning in 2005 prior to us buying the property. And I'm not here to ask y'all to correct our mistakes. But the reality is those units are going to be, even in a more distressed environment, with that alley where people can back in and hit the retaining wall by not paying attention when they're leaving their house in the morning. It's not conducive to being, it's not going to happen. And so it's unfortunate the wall is so close to Morris Road, but the wall and then as the pond as you go down the way, it's just, we have too high of a risk there for people to have accident and garbage trucks and everything else. So, I hate that it's close to the road. I actually feel more strongly about the front entry that's adjacent to the wall.
And again, I know what's before us is, for the collective passage of all of those units, knowing and hearing Mr. Lusk ask the question about landscaping, if some of those were shifted so that they weren't necessarily so close to Morris Road, and if we dealt with the visual impact, whether it be this site plan or a modified site plan that, could come to us in 30 days. Thinking, again, it's hard for me to ignore the community's concerns about that visual, and I just wondered if there wouldn't be some ways to help mitigate that, either by shifting some of those units that are so close to Morris Road, and or allowing some of those, or is there a way to, and again, we don't have all of those dimensions before us, but is there a way to shift those forward and get them somewhat away from that retaining wall? Or is there some
Are
way
you
to
talking
modify?
about units 136 through 154? If you'll notice on the west of 154, there is a stream, and now there is a stream buffer. I do not believe we can ship them in that direction at
So
all.
you either have to just reduce the number, which I realize is not going to be your preference. And so is it that there's no room to do the rear entry? And Mr. Wilson, maybe you could speak to that, or it's just that it's obviously a tight position?
I mean, it appears certainly to be room, but it certainly does appear to be very tight, especially on those end units closest to Morris Road. You'd have to make a really hard turn, probably couldn't make it in one turn.
To that point, would you say that would drive the market as far as marketability for those homes negatively with that tight space?
I believe that.
Julie, you still have questions?
Yeah, I'm just wondering how we mitigate the concerns of the community in terms of the visuals, given that this was not a new rezoning, but it was one where a lot of folks that live in that area and continue to live in that area expressed concern. And I think to Mr. Wilson's point, there were obviously 3 different and separate conditions that were put forward by folks, some of whom we've heard from again this week, that were part of that initial rezoning. And with all due respect to Mr. Woods, it's just hard to it's hard to ignore those efforts and concerns that went back to the time it was originally put forward, as well as continuing to. So I'm just looking for a solution that would help to mitigate their concerns and also not end up with the visual impact on Morris Road.
Why, again, is that retaining wall there? That faces the outside, which is where the rear entry would be? Because now the new front entry is going to be internal to the community. I mean, you're going to drive east on Morris Road and see the first few front entry, but now the retaining wall is what's in the back that's on the public road. Is that correct? Why was that retaining wall put there? Was that a requirement, or?
Well, yes, it helped flatten this site. I mean, that's quite high retaining wall.
So that's necessary there.
That is absolutely necessary there.
If I may, there's a unique condition adjacent to 136, and as I got the concerns this morning about this very issue, I came out and walked the site and looked, and as you all know, there's a large power line that runs down, but right before it gets to 136, it angles across the street. So we pick up about 25 feet there, and it's already landscaped. Pretty decent landscaping, although I'm biased. It's pretty decent landscaping. And again, I think we could probably, if we need to, look at how we could raise that in some kind of berm fashion that will work with staff's approval and not hold water or any of those type of things, and soften the visual impact as you drive out Morris Road. One other thing I wanted to mention about the alleyway is that currently that's set up as a dead end, which is not, I think as you've gotten more of these products actually built since this was zoned, the dead end alleys don't work. As far as traffic flow, trash truck pickup, all those types of things. And we don't have any room to come around the building without getting closer to the road, as Morris Road as it goes. And I do think the rear entry will actually get rid of the wall's view as you drive down the road. I mean, the front entry will get rid of the wall's view better than the rear entry, as far as the impact you see in the wall. But it's there, yes, ma'am.
And what I'm hearing is, obviously, we have a concern for the community, what our citizens look at, existing zoning, but also I'm hearing a willingness to try to work with the applicant, too, in this market, these conditions, to try to come up with maybe a compromise. And, Mr. Wilson, in your opinion, is there something that, we could come up with where, I know it's been thrown out, a buffer, more landscaping, a berm, whatnot, once the additional buildings are in there, that would be a reasonable win-win situation for both the applicant and the city?
Well, I do believe that heavy landscaping at that entry, on both sides of that entry drive, would significantly reduce the view down that street. It won't eliminate the view of those front entry garages, but it would significantly reduce that, simply by being a focal point and, in some cases, obscure the view.
Bill, I think you have a question.
Help me understand the legend on the site plan here. You have a 45-foot reservation line, is that for future right-of-way? It's a crosshatched area apparently all the way down Morris Road and down Webb Road.
That is a future reservation line, that's what that is. For
For
road
right.
expansion, I would say.
Okay. So up here on Morris Road at the upper entry, there by 136, that reservation line takes an angle off from the interior of the site towards the road, and leaving that part of the island, or I guess the area between the Service Road and Morris Road there. Seems to me that could be a heavily landscaped area there that would help soften that whole entryway too, like you were suggesting, without impeding in the future right.
It certainly would not impede the future right-of-way. Part of that island you see there is in the right-of-way, which we would prefer not to have any low plant materials in, but portion of it is not. And perhaps that island could even be extended a bit further down the road and get some planting in there in that island, more planting in that island. Do you think that's possible?
That's something we can think about as long as it works for, everybody from safety concerns and coming in and out of there. And it's fortunate for us that that reservation line does shift toward the apartments at the point it does, because it gives us an opportunity. I think candidly that if you raise the top of the elevation of the fence at all and replace exactly what you had, and it was 3 or 4 feet higher, it'd be a whole lot better for what's there. And if you complement that with some additional plantings, you're probably going to significantly mitigate it. Will never all go away, though. It'd be unfair for me to characterize it as that.
Okay. Is there anyone else that maybe hadn't asked a question that's got, Karen?
I just want to ask one real quick, because I know I went back and checked, and I have only received one email from the community on this. Have you received any other, input from the community? Because I know we always want to make sure we are listening to the.
I have not received any. I am aware of discussions between the applicant and Ms. Souter, but I have not been copied on any of those emails.
Is any other staff aware of any, or council aware of any other positive or negative feedback on this?
I saw that Mrs. Souter just joined us, and I realized
Excuse
that.
me, let me just, is there anybody that have had any from citizens or whatnot? Okay, go ahead.
I was just going to ask, and I think Mr. Woods had alluded to the fact that they had some conversation, and I believe that Mrs. Souter was involved in the original 2005 rezoning. I'd like to ask if the mayor would consider allowing Mrs. Souter just to give us her comments so that we have the full breadth of this discussion.
If it's the will of the council, I'll be glad to let Ms. Souter fill out a comment card and speak. If I can get our city attorney, would that be protocol or not?
Now, the public hearing is concluded officially, but I think there was some time remaining by the applicant. If they wants to yield that time to Ms. Souter, I think that would be appropriate. It's the will of the council.
Ms. Souter, would you be interested in making any comment on this application?
Well,
I'll just say the spirit of
yes,
cooperation.
in the spirit of cooperation, absolutely. Yeah, happy to do that. I'll just save the rest of the time in case I.
Okay. All right, Ms. Souter, if you want to fill out a comment card or at least grab one and speak, and to make sure you turn it in before you step down.
Thank you. Mr. Woods and I, Heidi Souter, 525 Sunflower Court, Milton, Georgia. Mr. Woods and I have spoken on numerous occasions, I guess, since the 2005 rezoning, and I have always appreciated that he has come to us BARA was the original group that, went through the whole rezoning process. BARA no longer really exists, but Mr. Woods is nice enough to call me when things come up, and I do appreciate that. And we talked on numerous occasions just regarding this modification request, and I was always trying to envision how to make it work and make it feasible and still kind of stick with that village concept. That's what is being used for this. It was rezoned as a live-work mixed-use development. So the rear entry units really do give it a very nice look and feel. And unfortunately, and I also had photos made at Target today of the neighboring Morris Lake and Fairview townhomes, but unfortunately the machine I used, I got a phone call, those pictures didn't come out. So when you have the front entry and you have such a short parking pad of only 18 feet, I have a Honda Odyssey. My Honda Odyssey is 18 feet long. So if you're going from the garage to the sidewalk 18 feet, there you have it. And a lot of times people don't park right up against their garage. They'll leave a few feet. And then it ends up not really being, that village concept where you can walk and go to the neighboring shops and stuff like that. It becomes kind of a zigzag, and it really gets messy looking. So the front entry, I have a really hard time with the front entry, especially being visible from Morris Road. And that area and the live-work concept really fits nicely because it's a good transition from the office park down into the rest of the neighboring communities. Those Morris Lake, right adjacent to that, and also Fairview, the next townhome subdivision down, they have a large earthen berm which shelters the units from view, so you don't see their cars parked on their driveway. And I pulled in there today and took a photo of a Ford Expedition parked on one of their short driveways, and it comes all the way out to their curb, and I know they're 18 feet long. So it just takes away from the look. If there's any kind of a let's say like a compromise that I would be willing to come to, if like for instance here right across the street there's Lake Deerfield, that's also a townhome subdivision. Those units all along Deerfield are all rear entry, but yet interior to it there are some front entry units, but you don't see that from the road. It keeps the community looking very neat and clean from the outside. It's obviously not a live-work community because it's a much smaller development, but the exterior all around still looks great, neat, and it goes along with that whole concept of what we were trying to do here in Deerfield. So I would have to say that if a compromise could be struck, then maybe units like 149 to 163, because I think you were looking at 136 to 163. Like if you go with maybe those 15 units that are farther in and do the front entry garages there, they won't be right on Morris Road where everybody can see them, and you're not going to have all the cars packed up there too, right visible from Morris Road. And it'll keep that same look going for the rest of the community as well, along Webb and Morris Road. So that would be my preference, to see, keep that village look and feel as much as possible. If there is an area to compromise, keep the compromise within the community, not along the exterior borders of the community. Thank you very much.
Thank you. And again, I won't talk specifically, but in general, I think the applicant has addressed those concerns somewhat with possible buffer or a berm and landscaping and whatnot, because we have certainly been discussing that prior to just a minute ago. So at this point, I'll let the applicant have his remaining time.
I'll try to be brief. With respect to the parking in the driveways, one concept we had talked about with staff was providing sidewalk all the way across on the opposite side of the street, which, as you all know, the streets are relatively not that wide, for an unimpeded walking corridor. And it's on our site plan. We're happy to put all that in. Part of it's already in already, so if somebody wants to walk, they can. With respect to the concern about the length of the driveway, as Ms. Souder and I have discussed on a couple of occasions, there's some already existing underground infrastructure which would be cost prohibitive to move behind the new units, whereas about half the units will have 20 feet of space and half will have, the minimum is 18. We don't have very many that are 18 at all, but that was the minimum of one of them in the calculations we did for staff. And sidewalks will be on both sides for walkability. With respect to the live work, while we continue to market this and have since day one, we've had zero interest in any type of live work type customers there, with the exception of a female clothing tailor shop, which y'all wouldn't have wanted. I don't know how to. I've talked to Tom about it. Those are kind of it's something on just the edge of the zoning of what would be an allowed use, and we're not going to go after that. But the typical people we'd hope for in a live work setting have not materialized, although we continue to hold out hope that maybe sometime they will come and hold down a building for that use. So be happy to try to put together some type of landscaping at the front of 136 to mitigate the concerns, if that's what we need to do for a resolution for everyone. But I do feel strongly that going with the front entry in front of that wall, if there's any way possible along the pond, is the best solution for this part of the development. So with that, I'll hush.
Okay, thank you. Ask if we've got any counsel might want to put forward a motion on this application.
I don't have a motion, I just have a question.
Okay.
Hearing Mr. Woods talk about the fact that he's willing to look, I think I heard him say try to look at a landscaping approach that would provide some help to mitigate that visual impact, and hearing Mrs. Souter, who was part of VERA originally, said that in combination with maybe shifting some of these numbers, I just wonder if anybody amongst this council would be interested in a 2-week deferral to let these parties work on something so it would be definitive in terms of what would be before us. Because what's before us right now doesn't contemplate any compromise position. And I'm always a little hesitant to, on the fly, start talking, especially when we had a site-specific approval back in 2005. I'm a little hesitant to kind of leave it to chance, and I just wonder if we wouldn't want to give the opportunity for compromise and the opportunity for helping to positively mitigate that visual impact, if it wouldn't behoove us to give these parties some time to see what they could come up with. So I just wonder if there's any
And I may want to ask just,
consideration.
and that's a good point. It does seem like there's some desire from all parties to work out some kind of compromise. To that point, though, rather than going through another zone process, is in staff's opinion, can the gist of what we feel the community wants and the council wants, as well as the applicant, is that something that staff would feel comfortable, and please feel free to weigh in, Mr. City Attorney, in getting the idea from us now, but be able to work that out, making the application conditional upon that, or do you think it would need to go back through a redesign and brought it back in front of us?
I would actually like the opportunity to illustrate to you what can be done with landscape materials to the greatest extent possible by planting. What can we do? And I think we can illustrate that to you. Certainly we'd need a larger scale drawing to do that, but I think that's something that might be helpful.
Alan?
Mr. Wilson, if there were improvements made to the landscaping to shield the view on 136 down, does that address the issue with cars parked in the driveway and the walkability that might be hampered from doing that? And is parking in the driveway a necessary part of this development is a question I have. I mean, there's covenants that can deal with that.
I think the
there's
question about
garages.
parking in the driveway, whether or not that's necessary, should be addressed by Mr. Wood.
'Cause
But
I mean,
I
that
had a
seems
different
to be
question
one of
for
the
him, too.
issues is, okay, first you got a retaining wall behind, so that impedes people's ingress and egress out of the garages. So evidently they were going to be parking in the garages had this original site plan go forward. So now that you've given us a revised plan and you have driveways in the front, aren't they still going to be parking in the garages? And why do they need to park in the driveways? And if that would help visually and allow for the walkability to still be maintained on the sidewalk, it seems like we can handle this through some other way, as far as covenants or something to prevent people from parking in the driveways to impede the walkability of the sidewalk. And then also improve the landscaping along Morris Road to help with the visual aspect of it as you drive by.
And Heidi and I talked about that at length. Well, I expect most everyone to park their cars in their garage. You can't help the people coming and going. There is visitor parking on the street, and for the most part, as I go through the neighborhood, it seems like people are using it when they come to visit their people. Is there occasionally a car parked behind the garage in the back? In a couple areas, there's space for it. One thought we had was not adding sidewalk on that side where the driveways are, so people wouldn't walk over there. And you're only talking about losing about 5 feet of sidewalk per unit because the driveway's there. Then you'd have a little landscaped area between each driveway. And then if people wanted to walk from a walkability standpoint, which I'm all for, you just walk across the street and walk down an existing sidewalk where there are no driveways, alley or front entry or nothing. It's all already there. And it's depicted on the plan, I'm pretty sure. Some of it's already installed at the top of the little pond or the open area. It's an odd-shaped rect. It's not a rectangle, but if you'll direct your attention to the center of the drawing, you'll see an area with no units, and it already has a sidewalk, has room that's contemplated on that side of the street. And I think that's actually a better use. In some of the neighborhoods we do with front-entry townhomes, the sidewalks on one side of the street.
I have a question I would like to ask. Okay. Mr. Wood, these units 154 through 136, where we're seeking front entry garages, there is parallel parking along that curb. But clearly, nobody is going to be able to parallel park along that curb here, along this curb with all of those driveways coming out there. So couldn't we lose that parallel parking along the curb in front of 136 to 154 and somehow gain a few feet for the sidewalk?
It's certainly something we can look at again, and it's something we can look at relatively quickly. I heard 2 weeks, and I think we could address both the landscaping and the other issue, and I'd throw it out there to contemplate putting sidewalk on one side of the street. I'll be glad to illustrate that, how it would look with the driveway and the garage as it goes down the street for y'all to consider. Be glad to do that, and I can do it pretty quickly.
I'd go along with that, and I was going to ask the question, is there any ordinance that would allow removal or sidewalk from that side of the road? Is it required that we have sidewalks on both sides of the road?
It is not required that we have it on both sides, but I would also like to emphasize that this is a live-work district, a mixed-use district, and where we encourage people to walk. So my last option would be really eliminating a sidewalk. I'd much rather eliminate that parallel parking along in front of those units and maybe pick up the necessary dimension that we need to shift that sidewalk away from the front of those buildings.
Yeah, I think that's a good idea. In the second point, by planning the north end of that island as you go into that north entrance there, I think that's going to screen any view going down the road. Certainly when you're going northbound on Morris Road, you're not looking down that entry road there. Your eyes are on the center line of the road going north by northeast. So I think if you heavily planted that north end of that island there, I think that's going to obscure a lot of the view down that.
I would certainly like to have the opportunity to illustrate exactly what we can do with landscaping in that.
I'd like to see that.
Choice.
What I'm hearing is there's probably some items that can be tweaked on this plan that may be a compromise that the council would approve. I'm also think I'm hearing from the applicant that would be amenable to bringing this back with a few minor changes as we've discussed. Is that correct?
Yes, sir.
But I'd have to ask the legal requirements for bringing this back. Is 2 weeks? Can we bring it back in 2 weeks?
I don't think there'd be any. I think the public hearing is over. This would simply be bringing it back for decision.
Okay. At this point, we've discussed it for a long time. I asked, does anybody have a motion or second?
I'll make a motion. I'll make a motion, given Mr. Corbett's willingness to sit with our staff and Mr. Wilson's willingness to review everything and to come back to us, to defer ZM09-03 for 2 weeks until November.
Your next
December.
meeting, council members, is December 7th or
Okay, so
21st.
for 3 weeks, December 7th. Again, that's ZM 0903, northwest corner of Webb and Morris Roads, by Precision Design and Development, Bowen Family Homes. Request to modify. I won't read all the conditions, but just suffice to say that we'd like for you to review and come back to us with a solid site plan that we can approve.
Second.
Okay, so I have a motion to defer this application for 3 weeks until December 2nd in order for staff and the applicant to tighten up a few things and come back with some amendments. I've got a motion by Councilmember Diaversa, second by Councilmember Tart. Is there any discussion?
I have just one point. As the applicant and citizens and others are looking at options, given the potential suggestion of removing the parallel parking, if you guys would also collectively look at the math associated with when you remove that, do you suddenly have the opportunity to shift those buildings forward and end up with the original rear entry with ample room between the retaining wall and the rear entry? It seems that if we suddenly gain some square footage, it may give us some options that hadn't even been contemplated on this revision. So I would just ask that we consider all of those things, because in the removal of that, we may actually get enough room that alleyway at the rear would give you sufficient space. So if we could just consider all of those things during this 3-week deferral, I'd sure appreciate it.
That's a good point, but I would ask that, staff and the applicant discuss that and use their engineering principles. All right, I have a motion to second. Any other discussion? Hearing none.
All those in favor of the motion, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? That's unanimous.
Okay, let's.
Thank you, sir. Thank
Yeah, I
you,
do
Ms.
want to
Ligerwood.
thank the applicant for continuing to work with the city and our citizens, and hopefully we'll come out with a good hopefully it'll come out with a good development for you and the city. Move on to unfinished business. Will the city clerk please sound the item?
Approval of an ordinance establishing solid waste collection services within the city of Milton, providing for the scope and nature of the operation, providing for the disposal of garbage, solid waste, and refuse, requiring the execution by service providers of a non-exclusive agreement with the city of Milton, providing procedures for the handling of complaints, providing for an infrastructure maintenance fee, requiring indemnity insurance, providing for revocation and amendment, prohibiting assignment and subletting without consent, and providing for forfeiture and for making other provisions. Item number 09967. Mr. Matt Marietta.
Actually, Mayor and Council, I'm going to handle this one tonight. This is really more procedure than it is anything being brought forward to you tonight. I can tell you that this is the same ordinance that we've passed for several years now. I do want to tell you that I had hoped to have a solid waste plan and enforcement plan in place prior to tonight, and I can tell you that we are making steps in that direction with representatives of our staff, representatives of people who have served on our trash and recycling committee before. And they're putting together, them along with code enforcement, are putting together a fairly good plan as it relates to solid waste hauling and solid waste enforcement of those haulers. Unfortunately, the calendar's just gotten the better of us, and that plan is not fleshed out yet to the point that I'm ready to deliver it in the work session format that I'd like to bring it to you in. But our risk by not adopting at least what exists today is that we potentially would lose the ability to enforce the solid waste management ordinance. And therefore, this has no changes over last year. It continues the status quo, understanding, Council, that we're in the process of putting together a more comprehensive and substantial process to enforce this particular ordinance. So by approving this tonight, what you do is you maintain at least what we had tomorrow, what we have today. Let us keep working with our citizens, our staff, and our code enforcement to come up with a plan that we'll unveil to you just as soon as we get that group, that core group that I've got together working on it right now, until they have kind of a direction that they want to go. Again, this is really just more of a procedural issue tonight. Thank you.
Okay. Do I have any questions for City Manager, Carrie?
Just one quick question. I assume that this can be amended at any time during the year once we have a plan.
It can, I just don't want it to expire.
Julie?
Yes, thank you, Mayor. Knowing that part of what came out of the Terra Committee was concern over enforcement of our solid waste haulers, and I do understand that fortunately is underway and that we're getting some
Yes.
enforcement policies and some staff in place to help ensure that that happens. Is there anything legally by adopting this that, because we've continued to adopt something without the necessary enforcements, is there anything, Mr. Gerard, that would preclude us, and I realize that we can amend this, anything that would preclude us from then enforcing as soon as we have those in place?
Nothing.
Okay, any other questions? Okay, hearing none, do I have a motion or second?
Mayor, I make a motion to approve agenda item number 09-967, approval of an ordinance establishing a solid waste collection services within the city of Milton.
I'll second that.
Okay, I have a motion by Councilmember Tartt, second by Councilmember Thurman. Any other discussion? Hearing none.
All those in favor of the motion, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? That's unanimous.
Okay, we can move on to new business. If our city clerk will please sound the next item.
Approval of a resolution continuing the wired and wireless enhanced 911 charge and establishing a concurrent enhanced 911 charge over voice over IP for all such communications within the city of Milton. Agenda item number 09980. Mr. Matt Marietta.
Good evening. On November 21st, 2006, when the city first incorporated, the city enacted a resolution pursuant to OCGA 465134, which allows us to charge a $1.50 fee for every phone line in the city limits. That's both wired and wireless telephone lines. The purposes of collecting that fee is so we can support our 911, our enhanced 911 system. Additionally, and this represents the first phase of this represents a reaffirmation of our desire to continue to charge that fee. Additionally, in 2007, the Georgia General Assembly added the ability for municipalities to charge the same $1.50 fee to what's called Voice over Internet Protocol, or VoIP, telephone lines such as Vonage or something similar that runs through the Internet service rather than a landline or a cell phone. So what this does is that also adds that portion into our 911 fee resolution, and then we will continue to repeat this in the forthcoming years to continue to collect that $1.50 fee.
Okay, do we have any questions for Mr. Marietta? Okay, do I have a motion and a second?
Mr. Mayor, I move that we approve agenda item number 09980, approval of a resolution continuing the wired and wireless enhanced 911 charge and establishing a concurrent enhanced 911 charge on voice over IP for all such communications within the city of Milton.
Second.
Okay, I've got a motion by Councilmember Lusk, a second by Councilmember Tartt. Is there any other discussion on this item? Hearing none.
All those in favor of the motion, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? That's unanimous.
Okay. Going to move on over to council reports first. One thing I want to mention, since I believe our next meeting's not till December 7th, if Linda Blow wouldn't mind coming up and just clarifying everything for the council and the public here for our tree lighting.
Absolutely, I'd love to. The tree lighting is November 29th at 5:30 at the tree. I assume everybody knows where the tree is. Hopewell Middle School is getting back in touch with me on how many carolers will be singing, so they will be singing. The tree will be obviously lit, lights on it prior to that time, and Linda and I are going out, and maybe Chris, because he doesn't have anything else to do, and check out the lighting prior to that. Sorry, Chris, I just
You know,
couldn't
Chris, if
resist.
just one little light's out, none of them work.
Yeah. Yeah, that happens. And I spoke to Target today, and they're donating hot drinks, and I'm pushing for cookies. So anyway, they'll be there. And the mayor will be there to say a few words to the community, and I hope there'll be a lot there to see the first lighting of the City of Milton Christmas tree. Okay?
Thank you, Linda.
You're welcome.
Is there anything any of our council want to discuss tonight?
I'm just going to make a
Julie?
point about lights. I think I just heard an advertisement, and I'm trying to recall now. If you bring in old lights, they'll replace those old lights and I think give you new ones. I don't think I'm dreaming
$3
this.
off on new ones.
Yeah, you get some discounts. So I don't know what we're doing about lights, but there are some.
Linda knows.
Good. So I know I've recently heard that, and it seems awfully early. Yes, it was Home Depot. So if we're going to be purchasing, we may as well save a little money. So, and if any of us have old ones, we could donate them, and maybe that could go towards lights for the tree. Just a thought.
Okay. Any other council reports? Okay. Going on to staff reports, and for you guys in the back, we're almost done. So.
Oh, are they here on an assignment?
Yes.
I think they're just here to have fun. It was a boring night tonight, so let's go to the city council meeting. And let's drag Dad with us too.
I've got more staff reports tonight than we've spent time in the meeting so far. So they just thought they were getting out of here in a couple minutes. Actually, I do have a couple of staff reports tonight, knowing that we would have kind of a short, what appeared to be a short agenda. They did. Let me get the just the fun stuff the minor stuff out of the way first, and then I'll get into a little bit more detailed stuff. I want to let you know we have a Thanksgiving potluck here at City Hall this week, Wednesday. You're welcome to attend. It's for city staff. Everybody's bringing in something. It'll be in this room somewhere around lunchtime, so if you're around Wednesday and want to share with the staff in that, you absolutely are welcome. The December work session is exceptionally full. I just want to let you all know that, to plan for a late evening that night. We've topped it at, I think, about 7 agenda items, 6 or 7. Unfortunately, they're all about equally important. So when it came to an issue of figuring out what we prioritized over the others to try to tone back that agenda, nothing rose to the level. We're going to try to pull a couple of them and bring them forward as advertised staff reports on the meeting of the 7th, just so that we can maybe get a couple of them off that agenda, because we're looking at a late night for the December work session. Just want to prep you for that. I know that's bad news, but we do need to get some stuff done. So, let you know about that. Councilmember DeVersa wanted an update on streetlights on Deerfield Parkway, and I'm happy to talk about that. We've got a couple of different things with respect to your question about that in progress, and just none of them are ready yet for a decision. One of the things that we'll be bringing forward to you at either the meeting of December the 7th or the meeting of December the 14th is the fact that the City of Milton believes that we will receive some fairly substantial federal grant dollars from that have been passed through MARTA at this point for some enhancements along their bus route. One of those things that we could use some of those enhancement dollars for are sidewalk improvements, streetlight improvements. I'm trying to find a creative way to fund your request, because we don't have streetlights funded in this budget. But there's an opportunity that we have to either, one, reappropriate funding, if that's the direction that the council wants to go, or try to find maybe some creative grant funding opportunities for some streetlights in the walkable community out here. There are some certain requirements that say the enhancements have to be within a certain distance of public transportation or a bus stop. At this point, I don't want to necessarily give you the dollar figure. I am going to give you a dollar figure. I'm just going to tell you that it's not 100% yet, and there's still some opportunity to tinker with what we will probably receive. But we believe at this point we will receive somewhere in the neighborhood of $600,000 for some enhancements and improvements along the bus route, since that's the only public transportation we have in Milton. So we are putting together a staff recommendation, and that will likely include some options to bring forward to you and say we think that we should close the gaps in these certain sidewalks, or we should enhance our walkability or runnability of the community with some additional lighting along Deerfield Parkway. So that is the update at this point. We're working on it. Those meetings have occurred late last week, and Carter, unfortunately, is not with us this week, but we'll be back next week, and we'll have something to bring forward to you in December, so you can either say those are good choices, staff, or those are bad choices, or we really wish you'd do this instead of that. But as soon as we can put something together, we should have an opportunity to move forward and not have to go to the general fund budget to try to figure out where we could find the dollars to put the street lights in.
Can I make a comment? I
Sure.
should have, I'm remiss at doing this. Just to mention to the community that Hopewell Middle School's Eco Explorers helped out with an Adopt a Road on Bethany Bend East on Saturday and cleaned it up. Hopefully, we've picked up the bags. If not, there's still orange bags sitting on Bethany Bend East, and a couple of tires and some metal apparatus.
Do we need to check tomorrow? I can have somebody check tomorrow if it's
Well, I
out
know
there.
we worked through Milton Grows Green, and the lady, Ms. Schwindel, said that
Gina's
she
very
was
good.
in contact with someone, but I don't know who that person is on staff.
It's through Public Works, so
Okay,
they should,
good.
but it's good to check.
Good.
But we were happy for the orange bags to stay there a little while, as Ms. Souter knows, because it gave them pleasure. We had about 20 students that came out to help, and some of the teachers, so that was really nice. And then one other comment that relates to the lights and the sidewalk with regard to this found money, which I'll pray will be $600,000. The sidewalk around Target and the Zimler project is really getting bad. I mean, there's a lot of places where it's popped up or cracked, and on the perimeter along Highway 9 and then down Webb Road,
Okay.
in the portion just that's there on the south side of Target, and then the north side of Kohl's. And I know that's not the city's responsibility. Well, I guess it is the city's responsibility to maintain that, but it's dangerous, and there's a lot of people running in the mornings and walking in the mornings and at night. And now that it's dark, it's going to be more dangerous for them.
Okay. I will add that to my list for tomorrow. A couple of other things that are ongoing. Obviously, the transition is still in progress. We will meet again only a couple more times before the transition to city staffing, or just a different, I don't want to say city staffing, because certainly our plan is not to have 100% city staff. There's likely some opportunity we will have with certain components of the transition to continue either to outsource or to come up with a different model. But our transition where the contract ends on December the 31st, 2009 is certainly on track at this point. It's an expedited timeline. We are meeting the deadlines that we have. I hope that you all received the letter that I sent to you last week. I've heard from a couple of council members. I'm ready to move forward. As I indicated in that letter, if you have any comments that I need to hear, please get those to me sooner rather than later. I'd like to move forward at some point this week, simply because I need to know the answers to the question that I need to ask the people. Because if the answer is no, we need to go a different direction. So time is certainly of the essence. Everything at this point is ticking along as it should. If you have any specific questions with respect to the transition, I'm always available to answer them on a by department basis or on a transition basis as a whole. Everything at this point is built with a plan A, contingency 1, and in most circumstances contingency 2, because I'm no fool to think that Murphy won't visit me at least once or twice throughout this process. And when Murphy comes calling, we need to have a plan to go to. So certainly as you want questions answered to how that's going, just feel free to reach out to me and I'll be happy to provide them. The third is a comment, or my next report is a comment with respect to the new high school location on Bethany Road. I've had lots of questions as to what exactly will our role be in that particular process. When are meetings going to occur? Are there homeowners association meetings that are going to occur? I can tell you at this point that Mr. Burke and I have had several conversations. He has committed to being available to the city through either a representative of staff or anybody else if the council would want to choose somebody else. I have kind of taken that role in the absence of not having anybody to give it to at this point, and I'm okay with that because he and I have talked on several occasions. When I asked him a couple of the specific questions about homeowners associations and other potential meetings with smaller, somewhat interest group type committees, if there are those that are forming out there, At this point, he was going to do some checking, but he was not sure that the Board of Education was going to be in a position to want to meet with small groups for this particular high school based on the timeline that they're on. I don't know that that's something we can necessarily mandate that they do. I mean, we can't force the Board of Education to meet with a certain group of people. At this point, thankfully, they are maintaining an open and candid dialogue with the City of Milton, and I'm thankful for that. I have advocated for the city every time I have spoken with him that we would like them to do very similarly what they did with the Birmingham Falls Elementary, that we would like the DRB to have a review of the particular school. We would like as many of our processes that we have here in the City of Milton to be used, even recognizing in some circumstances that we can't force them to do some of those things. At the end of the day, they ultimately hold a lot of those trump cards, and it's only because of decent relationships and good communication that we're willing to work together to get something that is a benefit to the city of Milton. So initially my thought is I've seen some emails about getting groups together, homeowners associations or citizens groups. When I asked that question last week, the initial comment I got back was, the school has had the public meeting that it was going to have with respect to that high school, and that was the meeting that occurred at the middle school a couple of weeks ago. I understand that Katie Reeves, Ms. Reeves, is having some type of a monthly update meeting tomorrow morning at Creekview Elementary, and I plan on being in attendance at that meeting if, in fact, the high school is discussed, to see to what extent that it is discussed. All I can tell you at this point is there are staff members that are in contact with the Board of Education. We are advocating on behalf of the city. As I have further updates, I will share them probably in the next 3 weeks. Since it's 3 weeks before we get together again, I'll share those by email. Understanding that we're working with the Board of Education at this point that has made no bones about saying they have to have a school open in 2012. Number one, based on need. Number two, based on the potential loss of SPLOST funding. And therefore, they need to get this particular school to bid by February of 2010. That is a very rapid timeline, and we'll need to be responsive to them just as much as we're hoping that they will be responsive to us and getting them in front of the boards, et cetera, that they might need to be in front of. They have brought a site plan, and the Community Development Department and I have looked at it initially a couple weeks ago. There were some issues that we sent them back with and asked them to do some additional work. We thought that plan could get better, and they could fit more stuff in places that they, at this point, haven't fitted in. So we sent them back, asked them to look at the stream buffers again, find a way to get out of them, and we're waiting on a plan to come back that has some of that work, some of that work done. Is there any questions I can answer about the school? The comfort I want to leave you with is that the school is not being silent to Milton. They're not being non-responsive to Milton. They are saying that there are some things they're willing to do and some things they're not. And they have the right, as I understand it, to do that. Is there any questions I can answer with respect to that?
Thank you, Mayor. And obviously, some of us, I think, have heard from a lot of different citizens. And while, of course, we can't require the BOE to meet with those folks, just a couple of suggestions would be that maybe we, obviously with some sort of a process, but maybe we look to have some sort of a reach out to ensure that as we, through staff, are communicating with the Board of Education, that we're at least putting forward as many of those recommendations that are reasonable that we can, so that we have maybe a collective list, if you will, of things that we as a council and as staff are putting forward to the Board of Education. Obviously, Tom Wilson and others from staff and Transportation, Public Works, yourself, probably have already identified some of those. I know some of us have provided some input both to Patrick Burke after attending that meeting. But maybe there's a way for us to ensure that our funneled ideas are kind of part of a collective voice, if you will, so that when you're at those meetings, you've got some of those ideas that maybe you've already fully vetted and have identified. But I know that some of the citizens that perhaps we've all heard from, have transportation questions or concerned about the siting of the building, obviously the design, stream buffers, et cetera. And for some of us that have been through this, we do understand that there's only so much that we can positively influence, but the good news is there is a positive relationship there. So I would just ask, if separate from tonight, whether it be at a work session where, since we can reach out to those citizens, either we help to organize a town hall meeting, or maybe we reach out to some of those neighbors, but that we help to provide them voice through us, just so that we don't miss that opportunity to capture some ideas that maybe we individually or collectively wouldn't have thought of. So I think separate from tonight, we could maybe talk about some different ways, whether it's through a work session or a town hall meeting, that could, with the intent of it being a very positive way of capturing information with no promises made to citizens, but to let them know that we are collectively looking to work with and negotiate with the Board of Education on everybody's behalf. Just a thought.
I'll check with Mr. Burke when I see him tomorrow. And basically, what I'd like to find out with this particular school is what kind of communication they're interested in even getting. Because, we could have the best. My only fear with a town hall meeting is we have the best town hall meeting in the world, and we elevate the expectations that we have the ability to do a lot. And we have to be just exceptionally cautious with managing those expectations, that
Absolutely.
we don't all of a sudden take a hit for something that we don't have the authority to do.
And so let me clarify my point. It was not intended to be a town hall meeting where necessarily the Board of Education was even here, but that we, whether it's a town hall meeting or a work session or just a meeting with us, because we could probably have enough ideas just amongst this group that we could be the voice of the community. I know that I've got a list of things that, having attended that meeting and having been involved with both Milton High School as well as Birmingham Falls pretty intimately, of things that I think that the Board of Education would absolutely be willing to consider, especially the architects have already said that they would, as did Patrick Burke following that meeting. And so if nothing else, I would hope that we proactively put some communications together that at least represent our collective voice of things that we believe would be a positive for that Bethany Cogburn site. So I think to your point, because there's a committed time frame that we all understand, the sooner that we can communicate those collective ideas, the better positioned we'll be, and I think the more responsive the Board of Education will be.
I understand. Is anybody planning on going to Katie's meeting tomorrow morning?
If I didn't have to teach students, yes, I would be there, but I'll just say that my experience has been that typically at those meetings, she won't go into a lot of details. It's awesome that you're going to be there, and I think anybody that can be should, but she's probably not going to talk at length about the high school. It would be, my guess.
I understand it's a fairly substantial agenda item tomorrow, which is why I'm interested in being
I spoke
there.
with Katie for a good while this morning, and I believe her intent is tomorrow to try to educate the community on what the process is, not specifics of that site.
Right.
The process of what they were going through, the timeline, and that type of thing.
Are you going to be there tomorrow morning?
I am hoping to be here. Is that Creekview
It is at Creekview
at?
at 9:30. And I'd be, Mayor, I realize I don't want this to draw out all night, but I wouldn't be opposed if we could spend a couple of minutes and just kind of get the council members' thoughts with respect to this school before this meeting tomorrow, in case there is an opportunity to weigh in. At least I'm not just weighing in with what Chris thinks. If we could give each council member a couple of minutes to.
I don't think tomorrow it's going to be about the specifics of the school. It's going to be about the process.
Well,
And
yeah,
it's
I
not-
don't know
Let-
either,
let
but
me-
they
let me-
has a tendency to take a mind of its own when we get there tomorrow.
Yeah, let me break in for 1 second, Chris, and as Chris and I have had meetings and whatnot, and as everybody here I think knows dealing with the school board, we have to be careful and walk a fine line. We certainly want to look out for our citizens and the safety and the looks and everything about the school, just as we care about everything. But again, we have to be careful that we don't push them so far that then they just say, stay out or whatever. One thing I know Chris is talking to him about is possibly having the DRB meet and do a cursory review. That's an opportunity for any of the council members to maybe share with their representative there of things you're maybe hearing from the citizens and whatnot, so that they'll be thinking about it when they meet with the school. The other thing is, I think Chris has a good idea, since Chris has got a good rapport with Patrick and whatnot. If we want to spend a couple minutes and go down and let people, if you've got a point or two that you think people are concerned or you're concerned about, let Chris know, because he can have those conversations and possibly get some influence early on that. So if the council's okay with that, I'll just
be a discussion
start
worth
it.
having if we have a couple minutes.
And I'll just make a comment, if you don't mind. I've been to hundreds of Katie's meetings, literally as a citizen, not as a council member. And it's not the appropriate place for your discussion to happen. Your appropriate place is to have a meeting with her at your level and at her level, to have a meeting and have this discussion, not in front of citizens. Not that it's not a transparent process, but it will probably be, it's a little tenuous at her meetings. And I think you'll accomplish a whole lot more if you'll just meet with her personally like I have, like Karen has, and she'll be very open to listening to what you have to say. Patrick's the go-to person, in my opinion, from all the perspective of the design and everything that you're talking to him about. And overwhelmingly, the emails that I've had, and I've had more emails about this than we've had about any single subject in the past year, and the emails are predominating transportation, and the city's thrown under the bus about the transportation. We've been given, by everybody at the school board, the credit for we'll have to enhance, the area, and it's going to cost a fortune. I mean, when people ask the question, we have to be honest. We didn't plan for this. And so those are the types of things that I would encourage us to really have some real strong conversations about now. That school's coming, I think, and if it is, how are we going to handle transportation?
Right. Well, and I'd just clarify, I don't think Chris's intention is to discuss these at the meeting tomorrow, but this way.
But if they see you there?
The problem I have is as soon as I show up to just listen, I'm on the spot, whether I want to be or not. And I'd rather be on the spot in an educated environment than, it's one of those things like I wish they would web stream the meeting because I would love to watch it from the comfort of the office. But that's not that's not possible. So when I sit and wait, is it better to be there and potentially be put on the spot, or better to hear about it secondhand? And I think the better answer is to be there.
And I think Tina brought up a good point. There is a concern major with the traffic and improvements to the intersection and whatnot. Just so the council knows, our staff is looking at that and hopefully can get what they can put on the school's property, which if it's on the school's property, the school can pick up during, as part of their construction. So hopefully that will alleviate some of the cost. But if I want to, how about if we just start down with Councilmember Tart, and if you got some suggestions on the school?
Thank you, Mayor. I guess the main concerns I have are some that have already been mentioned and have been shared with me by citizens, and just have to do with three areas, basically. The look and feel of the school, having it designed in such a way that adds to our rural equestrian character, i.e. things like perhaps installation of a full-board horse fence, black fence surrounding the property, walkability with sidewalks, which I think has already been addressed even in the design that the school board has even come up with. I don't think the fence has been contemplated yet. Also traffic, which has already been mentioned. I think the main thing there is citizens just want to ensure that that the school board has constant communication, or that we have constant communication with the school board to ensure that we're on top of the traffic issues, what kind of effect it will have to our budget, the timing, will those improvements, can some of those improvements be made on the school property as far as acceleration, deceleration lanes, if additional improvements are needed and they need to be paid for by the city, when will the timing of that take place? Will it happen by the time the school opens? Those are considerations. And then the last one being noise. I know that it will add significant cost to the school to design, or could add significant cost to the school to design the stadium in such a way to minimize noise. But could there be policies that could be worked out between or facilitated by the city? For instance, practicing at certain times, or having certain practices held in the gym versus the field, outdoors. As far as the seating and where the seating is oriented to the neighborhoods versus the school property. I know that I have no idea whether this will make any impact whatsoever. I just know that looking at the site plan, that there are almost twice as many seats going this way towards the community than there are coming back towards the school property. You know what I mean? If you're looking at the stadium. Yeah. So I mean, so could that be changed to where you have the majority of the noise coming back over the school property, and would that help with noise versus having the home side be faced all over, Highway 9? I don't know. I'm not a noise engineer, so I'm not sure about that. But those are the three main things.
Okay.
Well, I stood up and made my recommendation as far as noise goes at Katie's meeting at Hopewell Middle School, and I hope that they don't make the mistake that so many people have made for years and years, that they go build this school and not take the opportunity now to take care of that noise. And it's not about, no disrespect, but it's not about making rules and laws. It's about putting in the infrastructure now that takes care of the noise, and it's noise buffering. And if you want to take a look at it, the only university that I frequent is at the University of Alabama, and they have those noise buffers, and it really does take care of it. And it's very similar to what you'd see on Georgia 400, and I'm sure it is quite expensive. I haven't priced it, but I'm sure it's less expensive to put it in now than to wait till you have somebody stalking you with emails telling you that they can't sleep because there's Friday night football games. And I hate to be so direct, but that's going to be a huge issue, because I can hear from my subdivision, and every subdivision surrounding School Row now can hear Kings Ridge. We can hear Alpharetta High School from Highway 9. And we know that it's 5 miles away. And on Friday nights we can hear it announced. So that should be enough of a driving reason. And they need to just the school board needs to be cognizant of that. The design ideas, I think, go without saying, that the community wants the city to drive that design, and I think the evidence of how well Birmingham Falls build out went, that's probably going to be, a really good opportunity, a good working relationship, especially that you have with Patrick, and he's wonderful. Traffic, I don't know how in the world we're going to be able to manage that traffic. I can't figure out how we could possibly, manage it, especially given that it will be a fortune to really do it well. But I think that we have an opportunity right now, especially with Kimberly Horn, to take a look at what may be some opportunities that they've seen in other school districts and other areas. Most of the time, you don't select a school site and then decide that you got to do more transportation enhancements that would cost more than the school's going to cost, and that's what I think we're looking at here, so that's a little disappointing. The other thing is an entrance from Highway 9. That site plan does not have an entrance from Highway 9, and I think that's a missed opportunity, because what we want to do is reduce that traffic flow into the interior of our city. And I've looked at it, I've walked it, we've walked it twice now, from the back way where there could possibly be an entrance, even if the property needs to be purchased, and there's Fulton County property there where the water towers sit, and there's a huge open green space. I think there's a huge opportunity that's being missed there, and especially since they're going to set the stadium right there up closer to the water towers, and there's not going to be any parking back there. So you're going to have to walk a country mile to get there, and yet we could have all that overflow. And I don't think the retail establishments over there would mind, because it's going to enhance their business, and business is not great. So I think it would enhance that area. We're trying to make that more of a walkable area anyway, and I think that's going to make it a more walkable area. So I'll stop there, because most everything else you'll have somebody else to mention, but those are some of the things that keep me up at night.
And I'm not going to add really any more, because as we've discussed prior, traffic is an issue, and our staff is looking at that. I think I did mention to Patrick about the floorboard fence and things like that, which I figured most everyone would like, and they didn't seem to be opposed to that, things like that. So I'd say traffic, fence. It's hard to really define look and character, because everybody's got a different, in their opinion, what look and character is. I don't know that I would add anything. I guess I would have to say that I have to leave that to the architects to come up with something that's fitting and appeases the majority of people. But that's all I'd add at this point. Bill?
Had the opportunity of meeting with Bob Sussenbach several months ago, and reviewed the site plan. We addressed the same issue about access off of Highway 9, and I think that deserves a little more study there. I think it would certainly help alleviate some of the increased volume of traffic on Bethany and Cogburn and several of the other roads around there. understand the inability of the Board of Education to make off-site improvements, and just have visions of what's going to happen to Bethany Road and Cogburn Road out there. And possibly we should start looking at some funding to improve access or widening or resurfacing both of those roads as they border the new high school. So that's my biggest concern. It's not about some of the architectural features. I think we have some real serious infrastructure issues to consider out there, and I think it's going to be the roadways and the intersections that are involved in that area. And looking at the chief back there too, it's access for public safety. The fire department. As narrow as these roads are out there, and if there's some large emergency at the school there, certainly we want access for public safety vehicles.
Thank you. Julie?
Yeah, thank you, Mayor, and thank you, Chris, for the chance for us to all discuss this. No question, access via Highway 9 would be terrific. I mean, there are a couple of acres there, and maybe to the point that was made about being able to enhance even that business community and the collaboration, is it would funnel, obviously, a lot of folks in and out of that particular shopping area, and so maybe you'd even get some support, depending, and again, we'd have to look at the different options, but there may be some good opportunity for collaboration. And another thought is that knowing that I believe that there's bus service. Is there bus service on that part of Highway 9? Does it go down that far? Is that I just would be curious.
I don't think it goes that far north. I think they use Deerfield Parkway as far north as they go.
I was
for a
hoping
turnaround
that maybe
back south.
the buses went that far, because maybe there'd be then the opportunity to at least look at some of that $600,000 as one of the places where we'd want to not allocate it solely to the school, but if there's an opportunity along Highway 9, especially if we had access, maybe there provides us some opportunity that we didn't previously have. And thinking about access. In terms of other land, I know that some of the community members had also talked about the 9 acres across the street. Obviously, the more you talk about land, the more the school board is obviously not going to have that additional funding. But in these early discussions, we may as well talk about that as opposed to not discuss it. And the reason being is that there was concern about parking, not only enough parking, but also accessibility of parking with the stadium, but also the positioning of the parking. Right now, you've got a lot of that parking that's going to be visible from Bethany and Cogburn, and that land right now is right on the cusp of the Highway 9 overlay. And if you were to step, 1 foot out of that parcel, you actually get into what was previously referred to as the Northwest Fulton overlay. And so, in looking at parking, my questions would be not only is there an opportunity for additional parking to ensure that there's adequate parking for students and games, et cetera, but also how to buffer that parking. And I realize that there's some siting difficulties on that parcel because of the wetlands and the streams. But I think we need to think about, are there some creative ways to park cars where you have good flow of traffic, but also to help mitigate the visual impact. And so part of that then speaks to how to buffer that. I do believe that the siding of that plan, I know there was some discussion about whether or not the building could be sided more at an angle, et cetera. Obviously, some of the folks that are involved architecturally are good. They've done a lot of work and actually worked on Kings Ridge. Fencing and trails has already been mentioned. I think we just need to make sure that those walking trails are consistent with our plans for the walking trail. Noise considerations, absolutely. There's got to be a way. Even the speaker location, if we go back to all the discussions with Milton, just the locations of those speakers, and that's not an incremental cost. It's the same cost. It's just a function of do they put them in the best location. Tree save and tree buffers, I think that's going to go without saying, but I'm going to say it anyway. Because you've got wetlands that will be undisturbed, there will be, and it speaks to noise buffering as well as visual buffering, is that I think we need to make sure that there's a discussion about what those tree-lined exterior parcels need to have for enhancement. And when some of us were at that school meeting, that was not necessarily depicted yet on their plans. In terms of bus locations, one of the things that I've heard a lot of with Birmingham Falls, and I've, again, just applaud the efforts because it's a great example of what is possible, despite the fact that there were folks back then that said we couldn't get some of the changes that we did in fact get. But the buses are all parked in front of the building along Birmingham Highway, and so visually when those bus drivers go, you've got multitudes of yellow buses, and so it does negatively impact the visual on weekends and after 3 o'clock. And so if there's a way, when we think about parking and location and the ins and outs of that building, thinking about where those buses will be parked is important, because those neighborhoods probably would prefer to see trees and some buffering as opposed to Bethany, Bend, and Cogburn being lined with buses. So I think we need to think about that in advance. In terms of building materials, I do believe that we've heard from a lot of citizens that want to have a positive impact on that. We realize that cost needs to probably be neutral, but whether it's the roof or the building materials, and again, I'm surely not going to propose what that design should be, but I do think it's going to be something the community expects to have or hopes. Let me use the word hopes, to have some positive influence upon. And then my final comment would just be as it relates to the guidelines, and in particular the architects that are involved, because they were involved in Kings Ridge, they're aware of both the Highway 9 design guidelines, those that are currently in place, not necessarily those that will be enhanced through our current committee. But if there's a way for them to look at both overlays as opposed to saying, gee, this parcel is within the Highway 9 design guideline, because it's at the cusp of the other overlay, if we could encourage them to at least look at both guidelines, again, not as a requirement, but as a way for them to best understand what it is that we're going to have citizens hoping for. So I think both of those documents would be of benefit when they look to cite it as well as to design the building. Again, thank you for the opportunity to provide input.
Karen?
I think most everything has been covered tonight. I do believe that the traffic and transportation infrastructure is going to be our number one concern that we as a city really are impacted by. And I think whatever we can do to try to minimize that impact working with the school board, that's going to be very important.
Chris, you got a nice list there?
I do have a nice list. I heard you all say traffic. And I wanted to let you know that this afternoon, that was one of the questions that we've worked through our Public Works Department. I can tell you that Carter has received it, Sarah is reviewing it, and even as we speak, well, probably not as we speak, it's late, but probably tomorrow and in days past, that it is already at Kimley Horn for their review and inclusion into our master plan for traffic. So we have details that will be forthcoming. So it's not as though traffic, as it relates to the high school, just became known to the staff. We're working on that now, and I understand that's important to all of you. But thank you for giving me some. That's what they're making a recommendation as to whether or not it becomes part of the CTP or whether or not it's a different, whether or not it becomes part of a different document. I don't see why it wouldn't become part of the CTP. I just don't want to say yes, that's what's going to happen to it because I don't know for sure.
Since today was the deadline, right, for input, so it seems like we met that time frame. It seems like it would have the most impact, and it would send the consistent message that we've all communicated, is that it's important enough to be part of our master plan
Right.
for transportation.
It becomes even further complicated. We'll have to figure out how to navigate through this. The Cogburn and Bethany, one of those four corners of that intersection, there's actually right-of-way that would need to be acquired that's not in the city of Milton. So
not easy.
this is going to be a fun one to work through.
Did you see the signs? The
I have
future
not.
Signs all over the school board site? They removed them, but courtesy of the community.
Okay. No, I missed those
They were
over the
lovely.
weekend.
They're attractive. I think they violated our sign ordinance.
I was in Athens watching the Wright football team beat Bert's team. I just had to get that for him in case this
Maybe
is.
watching
So
you.
he's probably watching.
Probably
I had to get that on the record in case he streams this meeting at a later date. He threatened to wear his orange shirt, and I said, "Oh, don't do that."
I do want to thank Chris and our council, as well as our audience here and staff, for taking a few minutes on the school issue, because that does, give Chris a feel, and I'm sure most of those weren't surprises, and a lot of them have been addressed, but, I think it's obvious that the entire council is concerned about the school and relaying the concerns from our citizens, so hopefully you can pass those on, and the school board will work with us to alleviate as much as possible, and I think the biggest financial hurdle is going to be the traffic and whatnot, but, so.
That's all I have, Mayor.
All right. Bill, you want to make a comment?
Yes, Mr. Mayor, I move to adjourn the regular meeting of the Milton City Council.
Second the motion.
All right, I got a motion by Councilmember Luss, second by Councilmember Bailey, that we adjourn.
All those in favor of the motion, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Meeting adjourned, 7:51. That was unanimous.